Welcome to the Eagle Claw channel. The war between Ukraine and Russia, which has shaken the world economically, politically, militarily, and diplomatically, turns into a nightmare for the Kremlin from which it can never wake up. This war, born of Vladimir Putin's egos and ambitions, hurts the Russians and the Russian army the most. The losses of the Russian army grew like an avalanche as we entered the third phase of the war in September. The month of August passed with the great superiority of the Ukrainian army against the Russians in the south, and in Kherson, the Ukrainian HIMARS artillery and the Ukrainian Air Force intimidated the Russians with their legendary raids. When the Russians realized the danger in Crimea and Kherson, they started to move 12 battalions from east to south. This was the opportunity that Ukraine had been waiting for, and the Ukrainian armed forces launched a large-scale, all-out offensive, including the ground operations, in the entire east and north, and went against the invading Russians. The last raid carried out by the Ukrainian armed forces in the northeast caused very heavy losses to the Russian army. Putin's army lost many valuable things as a result of the attacks carried out, with a plan that was obviously carefully planned by Kiev. Especially the tanks and armored vehicles left behind by the Russian army while escaping put them in a seriously bad situation. As a result of the Kharkiv offensive of the Ukrainian warriors, nearly 400 regions were liberated in just 10 days. More than 7,000 invaders were killed and nearly 10,000 were taken prisoner. In addition, a report published the other day showed us that Russia's most important Spetsnaz unit was surrounded by the Ukrainian armed forces. A Kremlin propagandist confirmed in a statement that the Samara and Bakhshir special raid response units of the Russian Spetsnaz in Balaklia in the Kharkiv region were surrounded by the Ukrainian armed forces. The Ukrainian armed forces smashed Russian positions near the town of Balaklia in the Kharkiv region, and the Russians were concerned, losing their technical superiority. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces surrounded the Russian Spetsnaz Sober, Samara Russian Special Rapid Unit, with the support of HIMARS artillery. Some of the Russian Spetsnaz registers are thought to have been killed and the remainder, one Spetsnaz platoon, taken prisoner. It is reported that this unit, surrounded by the Ukrainian armed forces, is attached to the Spetsnaz Special Forces. The activities of these units in Ukraine have been criticized for a long time. Because the Spetsnaz Special Forces, which had serious training and cost, could not meet any of Putin's expectations, it is certain that those units have received the heaviest blow they have received since the day they were founded in Ukraine. The superior capabilities of the Ukrainian armed forces succeeded even against Russia's most important special forces, such as Spetsnaz. This is enough to drive Putin mad. However, there are many reasons for the disappearance of these units. Because the Russian army had not even prepared most of its troops in this war. As a result, the tasks usually assigned to infantrymen had to be solved by special forces. Traditionally considered the elite of the Russian army, these formations suffered significant losses during the 6 months of the occupation of Ukraine. According to experts, it will be problematic to make up for the loss of all these specialists in Russia, because they did the dirty work for the Russian army during the war. The first group we should mention in these losses is the Russian Special Forces' favorite Spetsnaz special units. Spetsnaz is the general name given to Russian Special Forces. It means Special Purpose Unit in Russian. Spetsnaz was established on October 24, 1950, by the Russian military to perform reconnaissance and special missions in peace and wartime. Their equipment is far superior to ordinary infantry. They can also make a big difference against Russian infantry on the battlefield. They have shown this over and over again. However, their losses in Ukraine reached enormous figures. In the latest investigations, the deaths of 151 soldiers from the Spetsnaz special units were detected. It is stated that 33 of these soldiers are officers. These figures do not reflect the actual number of casualties, but make it possible to at least roughly estimate how many Special Forces soldiers left the units of the Russian army fighting in Ukraine. Judging by the published obituaries, the 22nd Guard Special Forces Brigade suffered the greatest losses during the invasion of Ukraine. At least 30 soldiers of the brigade were killed, including 4 officers. For every Russian soldier killed during the war in Ukraine, there are about 3.5 wounded. Based on these data, it can be assumed that at least 130 people could leave the ranks of the 22nd Spetsnaz Special Forces Brigade as a result of death or injury. The exact number of Special Forces units is classified, but even according to conservative estimates, the elimination of 130 fighters could be equivalent to the complete failure of one of the Special Forces companies. Similar losses during the war in Ukraine were suffered by other units of the Spetsnaz Special Forces. The 24th Guards Brigade lost at least 21 men, including 4 officers. It is also known that the 3rd Guards Special Forces Brigade had 28 dead soldiers, 5 of which were officers. It would not be wrong to say that the loss of Special Forces officers is the most sensitive and difficult situation for the Russian army to replace. In the event that ordinary experts are eliminated, another specialty warrior who comes to replace him can be retained in a few weeks. In rarer cases, 1 to 2 months. If a Spetsnaz Special Forces commander dies, only an officer of the same military specialty can take his place. It takes at least 4 years to train a lieutenant with the appropriate qualifications, and to lead a company, a lieutenant must gain experience and rise to the rank of captain, which will take about 4 more years. This means a commander is ready as a result of a total of 8 years training. Compensation for the loss of this commander cannot even be compared to a tank or a fighter aircraft lost in the region, because raising people is a much more difficult process than producing weapons. As a result of the latest offensive, these losses seem to continue to increase. Because the Ukrainian armed forces pushed the Russian army to Donbass, they can attack Donbass at any time. In particular, it seems that the Donetsk region will be completely cleared from the Russians in the near future. The reports published in the region continue to provide us with very interesting information. A statement released by Russia revealed the majority of Ukrainian soldiers. The Russian appointed official said there were more Ukrainian soldiers than Russians. Ukrainian forces outnumbered Russian and pro-Russian forces by 8 times during a lightning-fast counter-offensive over the weekend, a Russian official stationed in Ukraine's Kharkiv region said in a statement. Ukrainian forces occupied Russia's Izium and Kupiansk supply centers over the weekend. Russia suffered its worst military defeat since its forces were forced to withdraw from Kiev shortly after President Vladimir Putin ordered troops to be sent to Ukraine. A Russian official said Ukrainian forces had crossed the Russian border, capturing previously Russian-held settlements in the north of the region, and about 5,000 civilians were evacuated to Russia. He added that the border with Russia's Belgorod region is now closed, adding that the situation is getting more difficult every hour. The Russian Ministry of Defense released a map on Sunday showing that Russian forces have almost completely left the Kharkiv region. A Russian official who saw a slower-moving offensive in the Russian-controlled Kherson region in southern Ukraine, where Kiev forces had made modest gains in recent weeks, said there was no cause for concern. The U.S.-based Institute for War Studies reported on Monday that Ukraine's advance in the Kherson region has increased as forces approach the city of Kherson after weeks of artillery bombardment of Kiev's forces strained Russia's supply lines over the Dnipro River. However, in the statements made by Russia, it is said that Kherson will not be released. They state that they see Kherson as their own city and say they will never leave it. Putin knows he has to keep Kherson. The sacking of Kherson may cause him to lose Crimea as well. But Putin will never give up on Crimea. For this reason, it will reveal great power. Even though it is not possible to predict how far he can go, everyone knows that Putin is reckless. Thanks for watching.